Brazil just got hit with a 50% tariff from the United States, and instead of backing down, this might just push Brazil closer into China's arms. Here's why this could be the beginning of a massive global realignment. Today, we're diving into a rapidly shifting geopolitical and economic story. This story specifically is very personal to me. As many of you guys know, if you've been following me for a while, I actually grew up in Brazil. Although I was born here in America, I moved to Brazil when I was 2 years old, where I grew up for most of my life up until I was 16. When I finally moved back to America. Growing up in Brazil, I remember just how fondly Brazilians felt towards America. In fact, many of my friends had dreams of one day moving here and living in the USA. I would definitely include myself as one of those. When I was a kid, I always knew I was American. I had the citizenship. Although I was living in Brazil, I used to love watching American movies and listening to songs in English. This is a topic that is very near and dear to me. I obviously love both nations. And to see this shift in alignment between the US and Brazil to China, I'll be honest, it is something that saddens me a little bit. In my opinion, it doesn't really seem like the US values their relationship they have with Brazil. And in recent years, I would make the argument that the US has sort of neglected Brazil and kind of turned their backs on them. And that opened up an opportunity for China to come in and take over that spot as Brazil's top trading partners. So that's our topic for today. I'm very excited to share with you guys the shift in geopolitics. I've done a ton of research on the topic in order to prepare myself for this video, and I think it's a very important issue. I think we should all be looking at this because I think it represents a bigger change in the world economy. So I really hope you enjoyed today's show. Before we get into it, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That does a ton for me and the channel. We're looking to grow. We're at 253 subscribers right now. Thank you so much for everyone that's subscribed right now. Very thankful for you guys, but we want to get that up. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the like button here on YouTube. That's going to tell the algorithm that you like my videos and they should recommend it to other people. So thank you so much if you have already subscribed to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name's Lucas Maciel. This is my channel where I talk about all sorts of things, really. Today, we're talking about geopolitics, but I have many videos about self-improvement, a little bit about personal finance. So make sure you check the channel out, give it a try, subscribe, and let me know what you guys want to see. If you want to see more videos about geopolitics like this, if you want to see more vlogs, I know I just posted a vlog recently. I'm testing the waters. I'm trying to get the volume up. Obviously, vlogs are very easy to make, but you know, my life's not that interesting, so it is hard to vlog. I do like these sit-down videos. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear back from you guys. It's not a lot of you, so it's nice to see comments, and I promise you I'll respond to all of them. So please leave your thoughts in the comments. That's enough shilling for today. Let's get into the video. Once solid partners, the US and Brazil seem to be growing increasingly distant from each other, thanks in part to recent tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump on his second term, which follows a historic retreating of US capital and of growing Chinese influence coming in to fill that void. This isn't just about trade. As some of you guys may not know, Brazil actually runs a trade deficit with the US. Essentially means that Brazil gets less from this deal than the US does. So this is not just about trade. This is more about reinvesting back into Brazil. Whether that's by building factories, creating jobs, investing in infrastructure, or just overall showing up in Brazil. Right now, most would say the US is sort of fumbling the bag when it comes to exerting its influence in South America. As you guys may know, Brazil is the largest country in South America, not only by size, but also by GDP. It's one of the richest nations in the southern hemisphere of the Americas. And now we have China stepping in like that guy at the club, coming over to your girl and asking her why her nails and hair aren't done and how he could treat her so much better than you. In July of 2025, President Donald Trump signed an executive order slapping a 50% tariff on Brazilian exports into the United States. The White House claimed it was in response to Brazil's prosecution of former President Jair Bolsonaro, framing it as a national security matter. But many experts argue this is less about economics and more about political punishment. Bolsonaro was often described as a close political ally and ideological friend of Donald Trump, and their relationship strongly shaped US and Brazil ties during Bolsonaro's presidency. However, while the rhetoric was friendly, the actual economic relationship between the US and Brazil didn't substantially deepen compared to when Brazil was ruled by the PT party in Brazil. What bothers me is, while Bolsonaro was president, and based on his large affinity to Trump, most would think that this would result in a closer relationship and closer trading deals between the US and Brazil. Whether that's on trade, reinvestments into the country, or maybe just ease of tourism for Brazilian citizens who would like to go to the US to visit. Now, Brazil did strive for a closer relationship with the US, with Bolsonaro distancing Brazil from traditional non-aligned diplomacy and aligned closer with Washington, especially when it comes to Venezuela, Israel, and the criticism of China. America, however, failed to reciprocate. Trade with the US remained modest at most. Exports to America were at similar levels as to when PT was in power under Lula and Dilma, and no major trade deals were signed. China, on the other hand, remained Brazil's biggest trading partner, and their trade share actually grew under the presidency of Jair Bolsonaro, despite his anti-China rhetoric early on in his term. For Trump to demand that Brazil bend the knee during his second term is not only unrealistic, but it's also disingenuous. During his first term, even with Bolsonaro, a president who styled himself as one of Trump's closest allies on the global stage, Washington failed to deliver any meaningful measures or any sort of deals that truly benefited Brazil. Now, to turn around and impose these sweeping tariffs and sanctions, as if Brazil somehow just owes them compliance, it's not just overreach, it's a fundamental miscalculation by Trump, in my opinion. Trump well overplayed his hand here. Had Trump actually put in the groundwork for a stronger economic partnership, maybe these measures would be easier to justify. But in the absence of further progress, this approach risks driving Brazil away from the US and closer directly into China's arms. And as we talked about earlier, these tariffs come in despite the fact that the US runs a trade surplus with Brazil and that only about 16% of Brazilian exports actually get purchased by America. It's only 16%. It's really not that much compared to their GDP. And instead of using diplomacy like it has been done in the past, Washington is using a hammer, one that is very likely to push Brazil away from being a closer partner with the US. I'm rambling here. Now, Brazil, for its part, has chosen not to retaliate. Instead, they're providing domestic relief to those businesses affected by these tariffs, and they're prepared to challenge these tariffs in the World Trade Organization. But the message here is clear. Under President Trump, the US is treating Brazil like a target, not as an ally. In late July of 2025, this is very recent, you guys. I'm shooting this video on August 5th, the US went a step further, sanctioning Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes under the Global Magnitsky Act, freezing his assets and banning entry into the US by revoking his visa. I did some research on this and it looks like the sanctions might even affect his bank account and credit cards. By sanctioning Alexandre, all American businesses are prohibited for doing business with him, such as Visa, which runs most credit cards in the world, and all of the US banks, which by proxy provide services to the US banks like Banco do Brasil, Itaú, Inter, and these could potentially all be affected by these sanctions. I don't want to go on the record and say this is for sure going to happen, but from the research I've done, it is likely that if these sanctions stay, things might get pretty ugly in Brazil. Brazil has been a longtime partner of the USA, and for that reason, Brazil's entire economic system is very intertwined with American banks and American financial services such as the SWIFT system. Many of Brazil's banks are listed on the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. It's going to be interesting to keep an eye on this as it develops and see just how far these sanctions are really going to go. President Lula immediately condemned the move, calling it an attack on Brazil's sovereignty, while signaling that Brazil may retaliate. Now, this growing rift is not happening in isolation. Brazil has steadily been repositioning itself in the world stage, most notably by their deepening role in the BRICS. And for those who don't know what BRICS is an economic alliance. It's really a block of countries. It's comprised of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And for Brazil, BRICS isn't just a diplomatic forum. It's a launchpad for concrete action and to a future that is less reliant on the US and its use of economic warfare. And over the past few years, Brazil has extremely expanded its trade with BRICS nations. From record exports of soybeans to China, to major oil shipments to India, and even with deepening involvement in agrotech coming from Russia. The bloc has also pushed forward new initiatives like the BRICS New Development Bank, giving Brazil access to alternative financing that bypasses the US dollar and traditional Western financial institutions. It is clear to us that for Brazil, BRICS has become a platform not only for trade diversity, but also for its strategic independence. The trade numbers already tell us the beginning of this story. In 2023, China made up over 30% of Brazil's exports, compared to just 11% being exported to the US. China imported over 44% of Brazil's total oil exports and 76% of its soybean volume in 2025 alone, and the year is not even over. Meanwhile, increasing tariffs are making Brazilian goods less attractive in America, effectively pushing them towards a Chinese market. And look, it is not just exports, okay? Investment patterns are shifting too. While Chinese companies like BYD are investing into Brazil, US companies are retreating, and this is where the contrast couldn't be starker. I'll tell you guys from experience, I went to Brazil last year and you see BYDs and Huawei phones and all of these Chinese companies all over Brazil. And don't get me wrong here, I'm not a fan of this. And that's the reason why I wanted to make this video. For decades, Brazil has been such a close trading partner with the US. And it pains me to see Brazil ditching the US and US companies in exchange for Chinese alternatives. But like I said earlier, I love both nations. If I'm being honest, Brazil is just doing what's best for Brazil. America is really not showing up, and Brazil does need a superpower like the US to be its leaders. And if the US doesn't want to commit to this relationship, seems like China is right there with flowers and a box of chocolates in their hands, ready to take Brazil in. Let's take the automotive sector as an example. Ford shut down its factories in early 2021, putting an end to over a century of operations in Brazil. Mercedes-Benz, although not an American company, has also followed suit and has closed its luxury vehicle plant in São Paulo. And look, this might not seem like a big deal to you. I'm telling you about factories leaving Brazil, like who cares, right? But these are thousands of jobs being cut and millions of dollars in tax revenue that is no longer going to support those communities in Brazil. And what do you think happened to those empty factories left behind by Ford, GM, and Mercedes? Well, Chinese automakers like BYD were quick to step in and repurpose the exact same industrial infrastructure that was there for American companies, taking market share from EV automakers like Tesla, for example. But it doesn't stop at cars. Like I mentioned to you guys earlier, you can see this pullback from the US in Brazil in all sectors. In agriculture, in chemistry, in financial markets. It has never been this clear that the US doesn't seem to value the relationship they have with Brazil. And if America wasn't willing to invest directly into the country, fine, but the US doesn't even buy most of Brazil's exports anymore. So you can't even criticize Brazil for wanting to make a switch. And the thing that bothers me most is that Brazil is like the USA. Brazil is also an European Christian colony. Brazil has similar values to the US of the freedom of speech, of democracy, and these values aren't shared by China. And when you see Brazil aligning with China, you can really see the Chinese influence into Brazil. Brazil is now pushing for a cashless society, mass surveillance, and the suppression of the freedom of speech on platforms like X, Instagram, and even in comedy. You can look this up. In recent months, there were comedians that were arrested for making offensive jokes. This is something that would have never happened in Brazil that I grew up in. The Brazil that I grew up in had freedom. The Brazil that I grew up in is not what Brazil looks like now, where your ID is on your phone. So this is not just about trade. It's about influence. America has turned its back on Brazil, and you can really see that on the way that Brazilian cities are being developed. And I'll be honest here, maybe Brazil should have ditched America. Because when I go to Brazil now, I see bridges and tolls and dams and infrastructure, internet, 5G, all of it built and backed by China. And similar to what China does in other countries, they do this by exerting their influence. They don't do this out of the kindness of their heart. There's always something that comes in return. I don't want to ramble here for too long. What do we make out of this? What's the conclusion? Well, the result is the US and Brazil relationship is definitely unraveling. For decades, the US used to be Brazil's key top trading partner, trading goods, investing in industries, and just fueling the growth of Brazil. But now, with punitive tariffs, dwindling corporate investment, and political hostility, Washington is making itself look like an unreliable ally. China, on the other hand, for better or worse, is doing the exact opposite. It's buying Brazil's oils, investing in farmland, investing in infrastructure, buying minerals, building factories, and creating tons of jobs for the communities in Brazil. Even Brazil's membership in BRICS is part of a bigger trend. A pivot away from an unfriendly America and towards a mutual polar future. And the point that I really want to drive home here is the US thinks they get to pull these tariffs and sanctions on Brazil as if they do anything for Brazil. Say what you want about Bolsonaro, whether you like him or not, Brazil doesn't interfere in US elections or judicial proceedings. And if the US has anything to say, they should use diplomacy and not enact economic warfare on a sovereign nation. A nation that has never done anything wrong for the US. And on the contrary, like we said before, Brazil runs a trade deficit with the USA. If the US doesn't rethink this approach soon, it doesn't only risk losing Brazil as a market, but it risks losing a long-term, very influential partner in South America to China, their alleged arch enemy. And once those Chinese ties solidify, let me tell you, it will not be easy to pull Brazil back. So that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this video, please leave a like here on YouTube and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my next videos. Let me know what you guys want me to do next video. Like I said, I'm trying to do the vlogs here and there. I love doing these sit down videos, but I do want to get consistent with the videos. I know I've been telling you guys this over and over again, but I do. And I might throw some vlogs in there. Let me know what you guys think. Obviously, the vlogs are not going to be too frequent. Like I said, my life is not that fun. I just work, study, and do this, but more entrepreneurial content coming soon. I have some really exciting things to share with you guys, and look forward to seeing you in the next video. Make sure you follow me on Instagram as well if you want to keep up with what I do on a day-to-day, and click right here to watch my latest video.